My name is David, and I'm a software engineer who works from home in what I thought was a quiet suburban neighborhood. I have type 1 diabetes, and my 4-year-old golden retriever, Max, is my trained diabetic alert service dog. Max has literally saved my life more times than I can count by detecting dangerous blood sugar drops before my continuous glucose monitor even registers them. When I moved to Maple Grove Estates 6 months ago, I thought I'd found the perfect place to live and work peacefully. I was wrong. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning when I was walking Max around our neighborhood's pristine sidewalks. Max was wearing his clearly marked service dog vest, complete with patches that read, "Service Dog, Do Not Pet," working in bold letters. We'd just rounded the corner near the community mailboxes when a shrill voice cut through the morning air like nails on a chalkboard. "Excuse me. Excuse me, sir." The voice belonged to a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a clipboard clutched in her manicured hands. She was speed walking toward us in designer athletic wear that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. This was my first encounter with Karen Pemberton, HOA board president and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog. "I'm Karen Pemberton, president of the Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association," she announced, as if I should be impressed. "And I need to inform you that dogs over 30 pounds are strictly prohibited in this community. It's clearly stated in Section 4.7 of our CC and RS." She waved her clipboard like a weapon, her voice dripping with the kind of authority that only comes from years of making other people's lives miserable over minor infractions. I took a deep breath and smiled politely. "Good morning, Karen. I'm David Chun, and this is Max. He's actually my service dog, which means he's protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Fair Housing Act also guarantees my right to have him here, regardless of any HOA pet restrictions." I kept my tone professional and calm, though I could already sense this wasn't going to be a simple explanation. Karen's perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up to her hairline. "Service dog? He looks like a regular pet to me. Anyone can buy those vests online, you know. I'm going to need to see some documentation proving he's legitimate." She crossed her arms and tapped her foot impatiently, clearly expecting me to scramble for paperwork like a scolded child. "Actually, under the ADA, you're not legally allowed to ask for documentation or certification for service animals," I replied, maintaining my pleasant demeanor. "You can only ask 2 questions: whether this is a service animal required because of a disability, and what work or task the animal has been trained to perform. The answers are yes, and Max is trained to detect dangerous changes in my blood sugar levels." Karen's face flushed red, and I could practically see the steam coming from her ears. She clearly wasn't used to people who actually knew their rights. "Well, we'll just see about that. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for this Friday evening, 7 p.m. sharp in the community center. This matter will be resolved." She spun on her designer sneakers and marched away, already pulling out her phone to start what I assumed would be a series of very dramatic phone calls. Over the next few days, I received a barrage of official-looking letters from the HOA. The first was a formal complaint alleging that I was harboring an unauthorized pet in violation of community standards. The second was a demand that I provide immediate documentation for my alleged service animal within 72 hours. The third was a notice of fine for failure to comply with pet registration requirements. Each letter was more ridiculous than the last, and each one was signed with Karen's flourishing signature. I decided to do some research on Karen Pemberton. It turns out she worked as a regional manager for a large retail chain and had been HOA president for 3 years running. Her social media was filled with posts about maintaining community standards and keeping the neighborhood family-friendly. She clearly saw herself as the guardian of suburban perfection and apparently viewed my service dog as a threat to her carefully curated world. Friday evening arrived, and I walked into the community center with Max at my side. The room was set up like a courtroom, with Karen and 4 other board members seated at a long table facing a handful of chairs for residents. About a dozen neighbors had shown up, probably expecting some entertaining drama. I noticed several people pointing at Max and whispering among themselves. Karen called the meeting to order with all the ceremony of a Supreme Court justice. "We're here tonight to address the unauthorized pet situation at 427 Maple Lane," she announced, reading from her notes. "Mr. Chun has been harboring a large dog in clear violation of our community covenants. Despite multiple requests, he has failed to provide proper documentation for this animal. I stood up slowly, Max calmly sitting beside me. For the record, I haven't failed to provide anything. Under federal law, I'm not required to provide documentation for my service animal. What I am required to do is inform you that Max is a diabetic alert dog trained to detect dangerous blood sugar fluctuations that could result in seizures, coma, or death if not caught in time. One of the other board members, an older gentleman named Harold, leaned forward. Well, that sounds reasonable to me, if it's a medical necessity. But Karen quickly cut him off with a sharp look that could have melted steel. Medical necessity or not, we have rules in this community. Karen's voice was rising to a near shout. If we start making exceptions for every sob story, where does it end? Next thing you know, people will be claiming their pet pigs are emotional support animals. The irony of her calling a legitimate medical need a sob story wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Karen, I said, pulling out my phone, I think you should know that I've been recording this entire meeting. Under state law, I only need one-party consent, and I've got that covered. I've also been documenting every interaction we've had, including your multiple violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The room went completely silent. I could see the color draining from Karen's face. You can't record HOA meetings without permission, she sputtered, but I could tell she was grasping at straws. Harold and the other board members were looking increasingly uncomfortable, probably realizing they were about to be dragged into a legal nightmare by their overzealous president. Actually, I can record any conversation I'm legally allowed to participate in, I continued. But more importantly, what you can't do is discriminate against someone because of their disability or their service animal. Every letter you've sent me, every fine you've threatened, every demand for documentation, it's all been illegal under federal law. Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. I don't care what federal law says. This is our community, and we have standards to maintain. That dog needs to go, period. She was practically screaming now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. That's when I played my ace card. Karen, I need to let you know that everything you just said was heard by more than just the people in this room. I gestured toward my phone, which had been on speaker the entire time. I have a contact at the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division who specializes in ADA compliance. She's been listening to this entire conversation. A professional voice came through my phone's speaker, clear and authoritative. Good evening, everyone. This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the DOJ Civil Rights Division. Mrs. Pemberton, I've been documenting everything you've said tonight, and I need to inform you that you and your HOA are now under federal investigation for multiple violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. Karen's face went through about 6 different shades of red before settling on a sickly pale green. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. This has to be some kind of trick. You can't just call the federal government. Agent Martinez continued speaking through my phone. Mrs. Pemberton, the violations we've documented tonight include demanding documentation for a service animal, which is prohibited under ADA Section 36.302, attempting to charge fees related to a service animal, which violates Section 36.301, and attempting to restrict or ban a service animal based on breed or size, which violates both the ADA and Fair Housing Act. Each violation carries potential fines of up to $75,000. Harold and the other board members were frantically whispering among themselves, clearly trying to distance themselves from Karen's actions. Several neighbors had pulled out their own phones and were recording the spectacle. Karen was standing there like a deer in headlights, her mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. Additionally, Agent Martinez continued, the HOA as an entity can face fines of up to $150,000 per violation, and individual board members who participated in the discrimination can be held personally liable. Mr. Chen also has grounds for a civil lawsuit under both federal and state law. I decided to twist the knife just a little deeper. Karen, I should also mention that my partner is an attorney who specializes in disability rights law. She's been reviewing all the documentation you've provided, and she's particularly interested in the pattern of harassment and intimidation you've shown. Punitive damages in cases like this can be quite substantial. Karen finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak than her usual commanding tone. But I was just trying to maintain community standards. I didn't know about any of this federal law stuff. Can't we just work something out? Agent Martinez's response was swift and final. Ignorance of federal civil rights law is not a defense, Mrs. Pemberton. The investigation will proceed, and you'll be receiving official documentation within 72 hours. I strongly recommend you consult with an attorney. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Board members were arguing with each other, neighbors were taking sides, and Karen was sitting in her chair looking like she'd just been hit by a truck. I calmly gathered my things and headed for the door with Max at my side. 3 days later, I received a call from Harold, who had apparently taken over HOA duties. David, I want to personally apologize for everything that happened. The board has voted to remove Karen from her position effective immediately. We're also having our attorney review all of our policies to make sure we're in compliance with federal law. It turned out that Karen's employer had also caught wind of the situation. Someone had uploaded a video of the meeting to social media, and it had gone viral under the hashtag Karen versus federal law. Her company, which prided itself on diversity and inclusion, was not amused to see their regional manager making headlines for disability discrimination. 2 weeks after the meeting, I was walking Max past Karen's house when I saw a moving truck in her driveway. Through the window, I could see her frantically packing boxes. Her perfect suburban kingdom was crumbling around her, one federal violation at a time. The final blow came in the form of a certified letter delivered to every resident in Maple Grove Estates. It was from the Department of Justice, announcing that our HOA had been found in violation of federal civil rights law and would be paying a fine of $300,000. The letter specifically mentioned that the violations had been initiated by former board president Karen Pemberton, and that she would be personally liable for an additional $75,000 in fines. I happened to be checking my mail when Karen came storming out of her house, the letter crumpled in her shaking hands. She looked directly at me and Max, her face contorted with rage and disbelief. "This is all your fault," she screamed across the street. $375,000. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I simply smiled and gave her a little wave. I defended my rights under federal law. Karen, you chose to violate them. Actions have consequences. Max wagged his tail, completely oblivious to the drama swirling around him. Karen stood there for a moment, staring at the letter in her hands like she couldn't believe it was real. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back into her house, slamming the door so hard that I could hear it echo through the entire neighborhood.